All right, welcome to the live stream, everybody. Welcome back to our Friday live stream. We're back after last week was a little bit different because we did our first premiere. Big video release. Really excited about that video. Was super excited to share it with everybody. And I was kind of like, I just took a lot of time to decompress. My family and I, we actually took a little trip with two small children. That was no small feat. And so here I am back, but I have so many ideas that I want to share with you guys. I'm physically able to do the stream, so I'm going to do it. Bear with me if it's a little disorganized, but I think I've got some great ideas I want to share with you. As you saw from the title, I made a connection with some work I did before on survival, and I made a connection to the chakras. So I'm really excited to share that connection with you guys. So let's see who's here. Oh, we got Brian, Eleanor, Yale, and Ian are all here joining us. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. As always, I'm here to chat with you. That's why I'm live. Otherwise, I would just release a video. So I'm live to talk with you. So all the ideas that I'm going to share today, I want to hear your ideas about them. I will pause my ideas and whatever we're discussing. We're going to look at some videos. We're going to look at PowerPoint. Let me show you some sneak peeks here. So I want to start with this quote today. You guys have probably heard this quote before. No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. Attributed to Albert Einstein. And I spoke about this in my video, if you've watched it. The idea being that when we move up in ascension in our spiritual journey, in our philosophical journey, in our life journey, when we move forward, we start to see different perspectives. We start to see things from a higher dimension. And that is how we actually solve the problems in our lives. Because another quote, I think also attributed to Albert Einstein, is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. So if you just keep trying to do the same thing the same way on the same level of thinking that you were on before, you're going to get the same result. But when you follow the spiritual path and the self-improvement path, you start to realize that basically what you were doing before, you were doing it wrong because you didn't understand the full picture. And then once you think you understand the full picture, then you take another step up, and then you're like, wow, I was still doing it wrong. At least I was doing it a little better. But on this higher dimensional perspective, I can see all these things that used to bother me and why they were the way that they were. And now I can integrate them into my life. And that's kind of the way that a spiritual awakening goes. And so it actually follows the chakras. And we've talked about this a lot on this live stream. If you've been with us many weeks, we've talked about how the chakras correspond to the levels of thinking. They correspond to the hierarchy of emotions. So real quick, I'll show you. This is the hierarchy of emotions. Right at the very bottom is shame. And at the very top is full consciousness or divine grace and union with God. And so everything in every spiritual teaching is working to move us up this scale. And this scale corresponds also to the chakras. And if you're not familiar with the chakras, they are basically I want to say Ayurvedic or even more ancient than that, Sanskrit, an ancient Indian idea of energy centers in the body. And they each correspond to a different function of our life. Another thing that it's related to is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he basically describes how we have to take care of our most basic needs before we can start to take care of more advanced needs. The most advanced need here being like self-actualization, true understanding of ourselves, integration of ourselves with the world, and the most basic being our physiological needs. Do we have food? Do we have shelter? Do we have water? Right? Hello, Susan. Welcome to the stream as well. Glad to have you guys. So glad to have everyone here. How's my audio? Looks like it's pretty good. Okay. So that's a brief overview of the chakras and their relationship to what we've been talking about. If you don't know about the chakras, I do suggest that you go back and look at some of the older live streams when we talked about them more in depth. But in this episode, I want to talk about the connections between the chakras and a lot of these other ideas that you're familiar with. Ideas that are, practical and applicable to our lives. The first one being survival. So, as you can see here, as I mentioned, survival is at the bottom of the list, or at the first thing on the list. It's the bottom of the triangle. I realized, I had this epiphany. I was like, I'm going to just do a live stream about this. And the idea is the elements themselves show us what we need to survive. Okay. And this might seem obvious, but I found it very interesting that the hierarchy of the elements corresponds directly with an epiphany I made when I was thinking about survival. If you watch the 44 Insights, I did let everyone know that we moved to the woods 5 years ago. And we moved to the woods with the mindset that we're going to need to survive on our own entirely. And so I took on this project of figuring out how to survive. And I actually developed a spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet went over all the I call it the preparedness skill list inventory. So all the things that we would need a community to be able to do in order to survive and to thrive. And I had a hierarchy, and you've probably heard the rule of three, okay? Now, if you haven't heard the rule of three, there are three very easy to remember things about survival. You can survive for 3 minutes without air. That's what, I'm sorry, it's offset on the screen. There we go. You can survive for 3 minutes without air, and that's your physical safety on this chart that I made. So basically, the first thing to understand about survival is that you need to protect your physical body, like your lungs and heart, and the ability to deliver air to your body. And if you can't do that, you only have 3 minutes to deal with that problem. So if we're going to deal with any problem in advance, we're going to focus on how to identify danger, how to deal with basic first aid, and how to travel if we need to avoid a life-threatening situation. So that's how I organized this spreadsheet about survival. I want to come back to this first category, spirituality, a little later, but we're going to start with 3 minutes without air. Now, after the level of air, you actually require, and a lot of people will think water, right? Because people know that within 3 days you'll die without water. But what people don't think about is that you only have 3 hours to survive if you don't have shelter. If you're in an area that's very cold, maybe it's wet, even if it's not that cold and it's wet and you have no clothing and you have no shelter, you will actually die within 3 hours of exposure. So 3 hours exposed to the elements. So once you have made sure that your physical safety is okay, there's no threats to your life immediately, the next thing to focus on is shelter. If you've taken any study in survivalism, that is the next most important thing. It's more important than finding water or food, is to figure out what is your shelter, what is going to keep your body warm and safe against the elements. Now, if you're in an area where it's 70 degrees out or 80 degrees out, you don't need to worry about this as fast, but in those cases, you might be worried about, bugs or whatever else is in the area that might start to affect your health. So that's 3 hours without shelter. The next one is 3 days without water. Some people have heard this one, right? You probably know that you need to secure your water before you secure your food. Food being the final thing. I mentioned social. I'll come back to that. It was something I added. So 3 weeks without food. So these are the things that people are familiar with. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Also, you need to remember 3 hours without shelter. And then finally, my intuition says that you can only survive for 3 seconds without your spirit, without a connection to God. Because then the body is dead. If the spirit leaves the body dies. And so the idea is that the body will die faster than without air. The body will die faster than without water or food. So I wanted to point out that this is exactly corresponding to the chakras and the elements that correspond with the chakras. So spirit, here being labeled as ether, that is what is needed most urgently, and that is what brings us closest to God. Next, we have 3 minutes without air, and then 3 hours without fire, right? Without shelter. And then 3 days without water, and finally 3 weeks without earth or food. So that was the epiphany. I hope you guys I hope you guys followed me along with that. Hi Yale, welcome. He says ticks, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you're out in the wilderness and you don't start taking care of your physical like security, that is shelter. You can group it into the same thing, and you only have a short period of time. So realizing that shelter is fire, right? It is directly related to fire. That is what made me kind of realize that the chakras connect directly to our survival. What do you guys think of that idea? I was pretty excited about it because it connected something that I was studying before I got back into my spiritual world, my spiritual trajectory in life. If you listen to my life story so far, right, there was an initial period about 20 years ago. I guess, first I started awakening 20 years ago, and then about 15 years ago, I had a spiritual awakening. And then after I did the spiritual awakening, I kind of lost it and got back into the world until basically last year. And then in the last year, I realized that the spiritual path is the way that I'm supposed to be going because it integrates with everything else that I've been interested in. And this was just one more realization of something that integrated directly with what I had been studying and what I am studying now. So I thought that that's really cool. And again, this corresponds to the idea that we are always seeking to connection with God, and that is the ultimate source of our life. Our life comes from God. And so life is created primarily from God and from spirit, and then it filters down into the earth, and then the earth, what we get from the earth, while it is important and sustains our life, is the least important of all of the elements that we can imagine. So these are the 5 elements, right? Ether or spirit, air, fire, water, and earth. And as they become more like the earth, our body or our being can actually do without them for longer. So I thought that was fascinating. And if you guys are interested in the survival spreadsheet, I can talk more about this. I thought, I was really proud of this when I created it. I didn't find too many other people that wanted to take it as seriously as I did. I was like, okay, we're moving to the woods. There's all these other people who moved to the woods because of COVID and all the craziness that was going on. It's still kind of going on, but then I'd want to talk to people and be like, okay, let's actually make a plan. And I was the only one who was making a plan. So I was just like, all right, I guess we're not doing this. That's kind of what led me back to the spiritual perspective. I was like, you know what, we're not going to solve this on the level that it was created. A spreadsheet is not going to solve our problems of surviving in the wilderness. And I also realized that surviving in the wilderness alone without any real connection to each other is not really sustainable either. Here I mentioned 3 nights without a hug. There's not like a scientific backing for that, but we can all imagine that as time goes on, the longer you spend without connection to other people, the more you feel totally unease. You feel lonely, you feel isolated, and you're just confused because that's not what human beings are designed to be. That's not what our spirits are designed to be. I believe that our spirits are also social beings and are constantly looking for connection to other spirits and a connection to God, right? The ultimate truth is that we are all totally connected and we are all connected to God. So trying to deny that connection and live independently is unsustainable. All right, everybody's saying hi in the chat. Amazing. So welcome to everyone. I'm so glad to have everyone here. But if you have ideas about what I'm talking about, I want to hear them so that I can slow down and cover those things before we get into the next things. But so the chakras, the elements, and survival, that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. I also want to talk about, let's see, so I'll just show you the chart really fast. There's this chart, which looks really complicated, and it is really complicated. But this is also related to the chakras. You can see the numbers in the middle there, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 9. And each of those levels is a level of thinking that corresponds to the chakras and also corresponds to basically how we interact in the world. And there's a YouTuber named Homath, hilarious name, but he actually does great work, and I want to share some of his video with you guys going over the levels of thinking. And this is, again, related to this idea that we cannot solve any problem on the level that it was created. So what we find is that in order to solve the problems on level 1, we have to move up to level 2. And then in order to solve the problems that occur on level 2, we have to move up to level 3. I also wanted to share with you this lady. Her name is Melissa Denice. I don't want to butcher her name, but I know her more because of the name of her podcast, which is the Love Covered Life podcast. She actually has a pre-birth experience that she talks about, and she interviews a lot of near-death experiencers and pre-birth experiencers on her channel. And she released a video only a couple weeks ago talking about the stages of spiritual awakening. And so I want to play a little bit from her video for you guys and show you again how it corresponds to the chakras and how it corresponds to this idea of solving problems on the next level. Okay? So we'll get into that in a little bit. Yale says, it's kind of funny, in one of my classes today we were talking about how self-help is such a Western idea, wherein it's also very selfish. Interesting. You can't really live without connection to others and help from others. Yale says, but this has to draw, but has this draw to want to help yourself instead of accept help. Interesting. Yeah, as I said in the video, healing yourself is connected to healing others, and healing others is connected to healing yourself. For me, the idea of self-help is connected to spirituality, and it's connected to basically giving yourself direction in life. I think a lot of people who don't ever turn their gaze upon themselves, they just do the same thing forever. They don't ever improve the way that they approach the world. And so to me, self-help is turning our intellect towards ourselves, understanding ourselves, so that we can do better in the world and also do better for ourselves because we are part of the world, right? I think there's a Buddha quote, you can search the entire universe for someone who is more deserving of your love and compassion than yourself, and you will never find them, right? So you yourself need your own love and compassion before you can give your love and compassion to the rest of the world. And that is also one of the lessons in my 44 lessons video is authenticity is more important than love. Because without authenticity, which is a love of yourself, an acceptance of yourself, and then a desire to share yourself with the world, you cannot actually claim to be loving others because you have failed to love yourself first. So that is that first lesson. I hope that was helpful, Yale. I understand. So, and I'm sure that there are plenty of people out there who are who are pursuing self-help for selfish reasons. And it's funny, our life or God guides us in the ways that are going to get us to that ultimate goal, even if it is selfish, right? So what I'm saying is maybe somebody picks up a self-help book because they want to make more money or they want to, find a good mate. They're single, they haven't had any success dating. And so they're like, okay, I'm going to try to do this in order to get this selfish end. But in the process of studying themselves and understanding themselves and others, they actually become a better person. And they might be led to some of these more selfless paths. And, I think there's like a value judgment of like, being selfish is not good and being selfless is good, but it's more like a level of thinking. So on the lowest level of thinking, again, we can go back to, Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. At the very lowest level, you must understand yourself. And the only thing you're focused on is yourself. If you don't have any air to breathe, you can't be worried about the air that the next person has to breathe, right? And this is actually how the levels of thinking works. So we can just look a little bit into this, right? The very bottom level is survive, and it is reflexive. It is simple moment-to-moment awareness of your own sensations and drives. And then once you are past that level, you are starting to seek pleasure, safety, and release. So you're starting to understand your surroundings. So it's not just yourself at the bottom level, it's also yourself and your surroundings. And then as you move up, we go from understanding that other people exist to actually understanding how other people interact with each other, but we're still focused on solving it from our own perspective, and then it goes from there. So I want to show you guys Homath's video a little bit, because I think he has a half an hour video describing these levels of thinking. This is a good segue into that, because it's directly related to what we're talking about. So Yale, your comment has transitioned us very well. Eleanor says, does self-help include physical fitness and making yourself look better for what is partly vanity and validation from other people? I don't know. I guess I feel like physical fitness is more basic than self-help. When people think of self-help, when I think of self-help, I think of the self-help section at the bookstore. And so it's more of an intellectual pursuit. But, I think that it's all necessary. It's obviously necessary to take care of your physical body. And you wouldn't call it selfish. Although I think there are plenty of people out there who, take care of their physical bodies to such an extreme that they are being selfish, right? They have so much energy and time in a given day. If they devote, let's say somebody who works out 2 hours every day, that's a lot less energy that they can put into helping other people. So I think, and this is my perspective, but as you study the spiritual perspective, which I see directly connected to self-help, you start to realize that you want to have a more balanced and integrated way of living your life. And that's what we talk about on this channel, and this is what we're going to talk about in this video. Eleanor says, I'm always wrestling with that because there's usually a good dose of vanity in seeking better health, at least for me. Yeah, like I said, I think when you do something that's positive, like taking care of your body, or you do something like seeking self-help, even if it's for a selfish reason, it's a positive action, right? There's plenty of people out there who don't take care of their physical body because, they let the negative emotion get the best of them. If you're taking care of your physical body, that's way better than, sitting on the couch and watching TV, for example. And you're going to think more clearly. You're going to be able to do things better. And we all have our proclivities, like the things that we like to do. Some people are better at, taking care of their physical body because they have things that they like to do physically. And that might be an answer for you. If you aren't taking care of your physical body, find something you like to do, right? To me, a holistic approach to life involves accepting the things about yourself that motivate you, that you like, right? Instead of being like, oh, I'm bad for liking this, or I'm too selfish for this. It's like, no, I'm going to use that aspect of myself to help build on the other aspects of myself that I might feel like I'm lacking. So, maybe you could teach someone else the physical practice that you love to do. And so now you get to do the physical practice and you're helping the world. And so now you're doing a very holistic activity that you can say it's helping you, it's helping others. The best way to learn something and to discover things about a subject is to teach it. So that's just an example of how you might integrate that idea. Yale says, I'm kind of talking about this market where people feel the need to help themselves instead of finding help in the community or asking for help. You feel like you can help yourself even though you caused the problem. But in the end, only you can help yourself, so it's almost a paradox. I didn't explain it well, but the response was perfect, so I'll leave it at that. I'm glad that your response was perfect. But that's actually really interesting what you're saying. So you were connecting it to what I was saying about people trying to be super independent. And that's actually a really cool insight, Yale. It almost makes me want to do a whole nother video on this. But I know for myself, I do love to, read self-help books and like meditate and think about things from my own perspective. But I also yearn to get other people's perspective and to have like a mentor. I'm still kind of seeking a mentor to help me and to give me their own perspective. I mentioned last week that my wife and I are actually together. We're reading Autobiography of a Yogi. And in Autobiography of a Yogi, he knows basically from birth that he's going to be a yogi, but he searches for, I think, like 18 years for his guru, right? His spiritual mentor. And he knows that he needs the help of someone else to get where he wants to go. So I agree with you, Yale. I think a lot of people think that they can do it themselves, and doing it yourself is important and useful. And I think now that we live in the information age, it's almost hard to decide which one is better, doing it ourselves or getting someone else's help. Because now, and also with AI, like the information age and AI have kind of changed the dynamic such that people think that they can do it themselves entirely, and in a lot of ways they're right? Like you can go on YouTube and it can teach you almost anything. But there is also something to be said for, the connection and the help that comes from someone with experience, someone who can observe you and your life and apply their wisdom to it and the outside perspective. And hey, that's why I do life coaching at wayofservice.com. Also, hit that like and subscribe button, folks. Yale said, also, we've talked about that. It was like, find a mentor. It needs to be both you and others. Yeah, so that's so funny. Synchronicity as usual. I'm expecting it to be 333 on the clock, but it's not. But yeah, find a mentor is a big one. I'm actually going to be speaking with Melissa after this live stream. I'm going to tell her about how I talked about her on the live stream. But yeah, I've been searching for a spiritual mentor and a YouTubing mentor, and I'm under no illusions that I'm going to be, able to do it all myself, and that my progress, my trajectory is going to be greatly improved by having a mentor and being connected to a community. But I think that the big challenge that most people find themselves in is that they're not in the right community to find a mentor or to have a community, because most people are not doing what they really should be doing. And that's what almost all of my material is about, is this idea of awakening and then following your life purpose. So once you start to follow your purpose, you're going to, be in a different crowd of people. And so while I want to find a mentor and I want to find, a community, and, we're creating a community, you can join our Discord anytime. I'm not going to rush those things. I'm not going to rush finding a mentor. I have it as an intention, right? I have it as an awareness that I want to have a mentor and that I'm searching for one and I'm open to the opportunities, but I'm not like anxiously working to find a mentor and sending out 1,000 emails or whatever it is you might do to find a mentor, or whatever it is you might do in your life. This is why, I speak about Taoism and being in the flow of life, not working from a place of anxiety, but rather from a place of ease and flow, and being in the moment and accepting what the universe is bringing to you and what the moment is allowing you to work on, right? All right. So, I think that before we get into these levels, I want to talk about Melissa's video, and I'm going to let Melissa give you an introduction first. So, the video that she had is called the 4 Stages of Spiritual Awakening. Oops. 4 Stages of Spiritual Awakening. And I found it fascinating. I was really excited about this idea. Let me just make it so that it really fits in the screen. All right, that's pretty good. Okay, so let's take a look. All right, I'll let her introduce it, and then we'll talk about it.
Do you feel like life is a constant struggle? Like you can never get ahead? Like you work so hard for very little result? Are you tired of suffering and you just want to experience peace and satisfaction and fulfillment in life? Well, today's video is for you. I'm going to share about the 4 stages of spiritual awakening or evolution that people grow throughout their lifetime. There are certain stages where struggle and suffering are the norm. As you move through the stages, you begin to experience more flow, more peace. Manifestations happen effortlessly. Well, in the previous...
All right, so I don't want to watch the entire video, but I just wanted to let her introduce the idea. And then I'm going to let her talk a little, very briefly about the stages of awakening. And then I'm going to describe them to you because, again, I don't want to just play her video on the stream. I do suggest watching this video. I think it's a great video. But I'm going to just let her chat about it for a minute, and then we'll talk about it.
This video in the series, which again you can find here. Each density of consciousness is correlated to an energy center in the body. The 4 major stages of spiritual awakening that we're going to talk about today happen at the root center, the sacral center, the solar plexus center, and the heart center. And getting to the heart center is the ultimate goal. I do want to say before I start going through the 4 stages of spiritual awakening that there is absolutely no judgment attached to being lower or higher on the scale. There is no lower or higher in a spiritual sense. It's all just an experience, and we've all been at the so-called lower levels at some point in our evolution. So use this scale of spiritual awakening just as a helpful tool to show you where you may be at and what you can do next. The first stage of spiritual awareness happens at the root center. And I like to call this need consciousness because the root center is all about survival needs and taking care of the immediate needs of the body. The predominant state of awareness that happens at need consciousness is focused on immediate needs and cravings and is driven to seek fulfillment through satisfaction of needs and cravings. The beliefs of need consciousness are as follows. Ego is God. Life is all about satisfying needs and cravings, living for the next high, right? I am unaware of life apart from ego's viewpoint. Life with a capital L.
I'll be right back,
I am unconscious of or uninterested in God. The identity is that of a separate self, and the experience is primarily of being driven by cravings and needs. Here's some examples of what living in need consciousness can look like. It can look like addiction, whether to food, drugs, sex. It can look like living to experience pleasure without regard for the consequences. It can look like a life lived around amassing money and possessions as the sole purpose of life. It usually looks like zero spiritual interest or awareness, zero interest in self-improvement. Violence and aggression can be a go-to response. It can look like very strong victim consciousness. Everything always seems to go wrong. So I'm just trying to numb my pain through my addictions and through experiencing pleasure, because that's the only bright spot in life. An important point to note here again is that there is no judgment. I have read multiple near-death experience accounts where somebody will specifically be shown, maybe an alcoholic who's passed out on the street, and they'll be shown that it's actually a very loving and evolved soul that has chosen to incarnate and have this experience for the benefit of someone else. And so there's absolutely no judgment. What we're focusing on here primarily is the level of suffering that's experienced at this state of consciousness. Most people experiencing need consciousness, regardless of how they ended up there, have a strong desire to be free from suffering. And that is absolutely possible and attainable. The second stage of spiritual awakening happens at the sacral center, which I call struggle consciousness. The predominant state of awareness here is focused on struggling through life and is driven to seek fulfillment through taking action in the physical world. The primary beliefs of struggle consciousness include: God is a separate being from me. Life is happening to me. I am at the mercy of my life circumstances. I am trying to connect to God through spiritual practice or control life through my actions and hard work. The identity is that of a separate self, and the experience is predominantly of striving and lack. I would say
There we go. Sorry about that. All right, so that was the first stage. Again, it connects directly to the root chakra, the bottom level right here, okay? And then she got into the second stage, which is a struggle. So the first level is survival. It's not really understanding what life is about. And then the next level is struggle. So instead of just surviving and reacting to our stimulus, again, here you can see, right? The bottom level is survival and reflexive, or just reactive. Again, here, the word is impulsive. There's no real understanding of the world around us. But once you rise to the next level, now you're starting to react to the world around you, and you're starting to work with it to get your needs met. So that's the second level, and as she described, she called it struggle consciousness. And then the third level, now I'll let her describe it really quickly, and then we'll talk about it.
Doing so. The third stage of spiritual awakening happens at the solar plexus center, which I call power consciousness. The predominant state of awareness at the power consciousness level is of tremendous inner power, and a person at this level is often driven to seek fulfillment through using that power to manifest desires in the world. The primary beliefs of power consciousness include: God is in the self. Life is happening because of me. I am creating my life circumstances. I am an individuated part of God, controlling my experience in this physical world through manipulation of my own energy and control of my state of being. The identity is that of a separate self, identifying as part of God, and the experience is of empowerment. I spent most of my life, up until 29 years of age, in struggle consciousness, and I personally experienced this transformation into power consciousness. It's a
All right. Yeah. So that was a super interesting point to me. The idea being that as we move from level 2 to level 3, instead of struggling to get our needs met, we start to tap into the power of manifestation, the power of God, the power of prayer, visualization, basically letting the universe help us to get our needs met. So that's level 3, and she calls it power consciousness. And so again, the contrast being going from feeling like you need to struggle to get everything that you need and everything that you want in life, it has to be you personally who gets it done, to the level of 3, which is understanding that you have spiritual power and allowing the universe to manifest the things that you need and want in your life. Now, this leads to perfectly to the way of service in the fourth level of consciousness. And Denise actually argues that this is the level of awakening that the earth is experiencing now. The earth is going from this level of power consciousness, which I think that we can all say that the people in power understand this, using the world to create what they want. That's what they've been doing. That's what we see in the mainstream, and basically at the highest levels of society. These are people who know how to get what they personally and selfishly want using spiritual power in some way or another, whether you believe that's good or bad. That's level 3, and that's the level that a lot of people are trying to get to. Most people are stuck in the struggle level of consciousness, and they want to move up to the power level of consciousness. But the next level above that is going to make this more clear. Let's let her describe it.
And this is the fourth stage of spiritual awakening that happens at the heart. And I usually call it love-based consciousness, but you can also call it heart-based consciousness, abundance consciousness, flow state consciousness. The predominant state of awareness at the heart is of being at one with, or at peace with everything, and also of being in a divine dance with life, a flow state with life. The primary beliefs of love-based consciousness include God and life are one and the same thing. Life is happening for me in support of me. My circumstances are a divine manifestation of whatever is in my highest and best good. I am in a divine dance with life, in complete surrender to its flow. The identity is that of a separate self in complete surrender to God, which begins to merge more and more towards oneness in God the higher up the chakra system you go. But at the...
All right, so the idea being, and I wish I knew exactly where she says this, but in the third stage, she talks about her own experience of it, and I find this to be true also. When you're trying to manifest, there's only so many plates you can spin or things that you can juggle. And so you're trying to manifest all the things that you want in your life, and something starts to fall through the cracks, something doesn't work. And if you watch my video, you saw this. I talk about how, I could create things in my trading account, but then the second I didn't pay attention to it or didn't do it exactly right, things wouldn't work out. At the fourth level, instead of focusing only on our own needs, we integrate into the field of everyone else, the network of souls that we are actually a part of, and we try to be in flow and unity with everyone else. So instead of just working for our own power and our own gain for ourselves, now we are working together with everyone and everyone's power together, and that leads to a much more easeful and not selfish mode of existence. That is the way of service. So I was really excited when I watched this video for the first time and saw these ideas, and I was like, this is exactly why I created the way of service, and it's why I created the service why I created the way of service when I did. I felt when I created the way of service that it was what is needed in the world now. What is needed in the world now is someone making the arguments of why we need to take this knowledge and understanding of personal empowerment and apply it to serving others. And this is a counterintuitive thing to a lot of people, I think, when they think about manifestation and all these, visualization and all the things that have been in the New Age and in the spiritual community, their focus. But the focus really needs to be a higher dimension, the next level up, which is understanding how we all integrate with each other. All right, back to chat for a second. I hope so. That was this video and Melissa's ideas. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions about what she was talking about, if you weren't clear about what she was talking about, please let me know in the chat. Susan says, stay in shape. Trying to slim down gets harder as we age. Not liking the extra weight. Taking care of yourself is important. No one will do it as well as yourself. And no one can do it for you, right? Yeah, so you're responding to Eleanor's comment. So I feel like, again, the first thing that occurs to me is doing everything in moderation, right? If you are working out every day and you're working out for multiple hours every day and you're wondering if maybe you should be doing something else, then maybe you should be doing something else, Maybe take some of that time to, focus on other issues in your life and solve those as well. But definitely don't feel bad about taking care of yourself when you need to, especially your physical needs. Yale says, in Judaism, we have two souls, the animal soul and the godly soul, and it's a lot like that. Interesting. Yeah, so when I hear that, I hear the idea of, the chakras. So some people have, 13, 25 chakras, but the idea being that, part of our soul, and I've heard this idea, that's kind of what you're saying, part of our soul is what comes down into the earth, and most of our soul remains in heaven. So our soul is not entirely, again, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. The soul is not within the body is within the soul. So the energy body extends outside of the body, and the idea being that as it goes further and further out, it's really becoming one with God and all of creation, which is all the same thing. Yale says, the animal soul is concerned with survival, pleasure, and self-preservation. It is driven by instinct and desires that often lead us astray. In contrast, the godly soul represents our higher self, a divine spark within us that yearns for connection with God and fulfillment through spiritual pursuits. That's the base level, but very similar. Yeah, I mean, that sounds accurate to me. And, a lot of people worry, it's like, oh, is Judaism's description of it right? Or is like the chakras correct? Or is the idea that, it's all one? It's like, no, these are all different perspectives of the same idea. And we are all working to try to figure out what is the truth. And, I've said in previous streams that I'd like to be able to apply scientific methods to these questions. But unfortunately, the current state of the world is that the scientific method is not being applied to these. Anybody who does research on the soul or research on energy healing or the energy body, they're not getting funding. Their results are not being published, right? We all know this is true. So that's one thing that I hope that, a movement like the Way of Service and all the connected movements and the evolution of mankind, hopefully into a higher state of existence, will allow us to change society such that we can apply the scientific method to these ideas and get a more definite understanding of, is it one soul or two souls, or is it, chakras and it's all continuous? My intuition says that there's no separation, but there is like a definition, and there's like it's not that there's two souls separated, but rather there is a category of soul that resides in our animal body, and there is a category of our soul that resides up with God. Susan said, What's the story? We have a nice wolf inside, an angry wolf inside. The one that grows the most is the one we feed the most. Yes. And Yale says they are so close to the same, which is crazy. Are you talking about the chakras and the soul idea that you're mentioning? Yeah, I think it's crazy how all this stuff corresponds, how Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the AQAL levels of thinking, that's what this chart is, the AQAL. This corresponds to the chakras, and it all integrates in the same way. It integrates with the Hawkins emotional scale, right? The lowest levels, these are things that you feel when your survival is threatened, right? And then these are things that you feel as you start to integrate yourself into the world, and you start to, things that you want, like desire, anger, pride. Those are related to your personal power in the world. And then as we ascend upwards, we start to get courage and willingness and acceptance. Acceptance is like an emotion that to me is related to the heart chakra. It's related to this idea of being in unity with everyone and not just trying to get what you want out of the world. And then as we move up even more, we start to get, oneness, inner love, presence, and finally divine grace and connection with God himself. And, if you read Autobiography of a Yogi, you will understand that that is ultimately the outcome that you will attain once you proceed through the path of selflessness, right? Once you let go, and this is why all spiritual traditions talk about, kind of letting go of the material world in order to ascend spiritually. And it's not just because, or it's not because material things are bad. They're not bad, right? Like every spiritual, I was just speaking with my wife about it. In Autobiography of a Yogi, like Yogananda gets by because his father is rich. I mean, that's why he's able to basically do all these things. So he uses wealth plenty, and he established all these yogic societies in the United States. They still exist. The Self-Realization Fellowship took a lot of money to get there, right? So it's not that material things are bad, but rather that our focus on them as our only source of happiness is what causes suffering. And so once we can ascend above this idea that our personal material situation is the only thing that matters to us, that's when you can finally start to reach up into the higher levels of consciousness. Yale says, yes, the two souls and what she said in the video in general for level 3, I think it was, right? Yale says it's the same info, just interpreted differently, right? There isn't only one path to the truth, exactly. And that's one of the biggest ideas that I want to talk about on this channel. I mentioned it, the idea of mixed spiritual arts. I introduced that idea in the 44 lessons video. I'm really excited about that idea. I feel like it's going to be a core part, and it has been a core part of the Way of Service message, which is, I'm going to bring ideas from everywhere that I find them. And I believe that God brings these ideas to me from all these different perspectives so that I can integrate them. Because, following Bashar's advice of following your highest excitement, my highest excitement is usually finding these connections between the different spiritual traditions and showing how they connect, and then also showing how they connect to people's lives. That's the life coaching and helping people directly. It's so exciting to see all the connections and the way that all these ideas can integrate into somebody's life and really help them solve their most immediate problems. Yale says, MSA, yeah, mixed spiritual arts, you said it before. It's because I'm reading your mind, Yale, that's why. We're all reading our mind. Once you reach a certain level, you can start to read each other's mind. A lot of that in Autobiography of a Yogi as well. A lot of plugs for that one. I'm going to have to do a book review, I think, once I finish it, which will be very soon because I'm flying through that book. All right, so speaking of mixed spiritual arts, let's go into the work of Homath. All right, he created this chart, and I want to give you guys, I want to let you listen to some of his video and let him introduce it, okay? Here is the levels video. And we're going to start at 3:15. Well, actually, we'll let him do the intro, and then we will jump ahead. Okay, again, I don't want to watch the entire video. You guys can do that on your own, but we're going to watch some and then discuss it, okay?
So what the hell is this all about? This video is about levels of thinking. It is theoretical, which is fascinating, and it also has colorful jokes. I use this diagram a lot in my videos because it helps explain some of the wild things that people say and do. It's based on the work of several researchers. I'm trying to make it easier to read for a wider audience. This is my interpretation of a model of consciousness that I studied. It includes quadrants, levels, lines, states, and types. Today I'm talking about levels. I want to make a big, long video explaining each level in detail, but for now I'm just going to do this short version to get it out of the way and get the ball rolling. But before we get started, here are some misspelled vegetables because I'm told that it helps if I'm cute. Here's a cactus. So these levels are stages of psychological development. They have been studied by numerous researchers. Some of the most famous models come from Jean Piaget, here's a snapshot of his work, and Abraham Maslow, who had the hierarchy of needs. Everybody is born down here, and nearly everybody gets up to at least this stage by adulthood. There are many factors that determine how you will develop and when, including your surroundings, your choices, your culture, and the brain you were born with. These are the quadrants. They are different ways of looking at reality. In this case, this would be your mind, your brain, your culture, and your society. They all happen at the same time because the mind is the brain, and culture is a lot of minds, and society is what those minds do. I should also say that people are never really in a level. You just slowly develop the ability to think at higher levels as you gain experience, but we all use the lower levels every day. When you have to use the bathroom, for example, that's a level 1 process. It's not a complex style of thought, it's just a feeling or an urge. So some people make it up to higher stages, and some people never do. Most people on Earth spend most of their time in these 4 stages, and this one is only very common in modernized places. And it's the first stage where you can adopt a world-centered level of understanding, which means understanding how people think the way they do based on where they're from. Before that level, there are right and wrong ways of thinking, so you would either be doing it right or you're not, and then they would say you're either doing it right or you're not. After that, it's more like, well, maybe I would think that way if I was from there, or maybe I would be more like you if I lived your life. That's where global thinking begins. Speaking of global thinking, this is my
So that's his introduction. But it's a little bit all over the place. Basically, the idea is that there is this levels of thinking, and it corresponds to what we were talking about already. And you'll see that as we go forward here. So I want to let him describe some of the levels right here.
6 months extra low price, stay in these lower levels of thinking. Limited time offer. I hope it's also a limited time that we stay in these lower levels of thinking. Let's talk about what they are and how they work and how to move on. Before I get started, I should say that higher does not always mean better. Some people watch my videos where I talk about my mistakes and they say, "Oh, you think you're at a high level? You sound like a jerk." But higher doesn't mean better person, it means more aware. So here's the lower level of awareness, seeing things. And then as you go higher in the levels of awareness, it becomes much more complex. You're seeing people, seeing almost into infinity. And so when I make mistakes in here, I usually know exactly why they're happening.
All right, so that's a really brief overview of the idea, and now we'll get directly into the actual stages of thinking.
Circumstance because I think it would be better overall. So that's in order. Wanting something, knowing how to get it from someone, knowing how to control the interaction, knowing whether that's right or wrong according to the rules that you live by, and then becoming the author of your own sense of right and wrong. And then when you take another step back to this hippie level, it's like, well, who is anyone to judge my choices? My choices are right for me, and so there isn't really such a thing as right and wrong, it's just what works for me. That's why they call that level. So that's in order.
All right, so sorry, that's way too fast as an introduction. So let me go through the levels myself to help you guys understand, and then we'll go back into Homath's description because he's a fast talker, he's a smart guy, but I wanna go through it in a more basic way so you guys understand, and then we can let Homath describe it a little more because he's got some really useful drawings that make it pretty interesting. All right. Oops. I don't know why that's not working. Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry, I just want to get the music on. All right, so level 1 is survive, right? So as we said before, it's just I exist, okay? And maybe it'll be helpful if I just use his pictures. Let's see. I'm going to find other pictures. 806. All right. So this is level 1. I exist, okay? And then level 2 is that other things exist and other people exist, right? So here he has like a volcano, right? You can think of like a caveman. It's like, oh, the volcano exists and it's dangerous. So that's level 2. And again, you can see how this corresponds with the struggle consciousness. So then we get to level 3. Level 3, so this you can tell by the colors, right? So level 3 is where you start to realize that not only is there other people and I want things from them, right? That's level 2. But at level 3, you start to understand how you can control the situation to get what you want. You see how this corresponds to the 3rd level of spiritual awakening. How can you use your personal power to get what you want? So at this level, you're not just looking, oh, there's another person. Now you're saying, oh, there's another person, and then there's also another person, and I can see how they interact with each other. And so understanding the interactions of other people with each other starts to give you an understanding of how you might, help yourself by understanding the dynamics to get what you want. So that's level 3. Level 4 is then stepping outside of that understanding and seeing that everyone is trying to figure out how to get what they want. And so in order to have a society, this is the first societal level, again, that 4th level of unity consciousness, the heart chakra. How do we integrate with each other? And so at the 4th level, there are moral rules that are applied to society, okay? So that's level 4. Now at level 5, and so each level is removing itself from the level and observing that level from a higher perspective, right? So at level 1, you go above yourself and you see, oh, there's another person. That's level 2. Now you see there's you and another person, and then you go to the 3rd level, and now you see that there are other people interacting also. That's the 3rd level. And now you go to the 4th level and you see there are other people interacting, and they are all interacting in a web, and so we need to have morals and rules in order for this to work. Okay, so it's not just about me getting what I want, it's about all of society getting what it wants. Now, above level 4, we get to level 5, where we start to see that there are different societies. Okay, so it's like zooming out even further, not just looking at my own society, but understanding that there are multiple societies and that what is right and wrong will differ within each society. Okay? And then as it gets higher up, it actually becomes more complicated and harder to explain. So I have some notes here. Okay, so at level 5, that's where we get science for the first time. That's objective observation. Is that, it's really zooming out and not just having moral rules, but also recognizing that there are physical rules in the world that it doesn't change where you are. There might be different moral rules in this society than in this one, but the physical, scientific rules will be the same. That's level 5. Now level 6. Level 6 is pulling out even further from that and seeing that the observer himself affects the way that they see the societies. And Homath calls this the hippie level. So at level 6, people start to say, okay, well, there's no such thing as morality because everyone's concept of morality is based on their own perspective. So this is the idea that the observer affects what is observed. And so now we start to get away from the ability to solve things scientifically. Now at level 7, we step out from the idea that each observer has their own perspective, and we realize that each observer has their own perspective depending on their timeline. So you a year ago is different from you today. You 10 years ago is different from you today. So that's level 7, is recognizing that even the observer themselves is changing throughout time. And then level 8 is integrating, and so level 8 and 9 are very difficult to describe. Basically, you're integrating all of the ideas that there are multiple observers moving through time, but also that there is a construct of time that even exists at level 8. You're starting to understand the way that the universe actually integrates. And then level 9 being total unity and awareness, right? So if you look at this chart, it says complete. Okay, so again, let's go back through it. Level 1, survive. Level 2, connect, right? There's 2 people. Level 3, now there's 3 people, or there's like a group of people, and you're figuring out how to control. And then at level 5, you are finding belonging. And then at level 4, you're finding belonging. At level 5, you are achieving. So let's read this a little more. So I'm not really sure how that word fits. Let's read what it means by achiever consciousness. Whole system effectiveness rules over functional reasoning, formal operational logic, and objective observation, right? So this is the application of science to our society and not just moral rules, right? And then at level 6, we're applying our understanding of each individual, right? So he calls it here radical relativism rules over a single system view. All right, so that is a really quick overview of this idea, and now I'm going to have Homath describe it a little more, and hopefully it'll become more clear. We're going to go back. We're going to back up here, and we're going to let him describe the different levels. So let's start at minute 7. Here we go.
Complex, but you don't have to deal with any of this uncertainty. So higher is more complex, but complex is not always good. The way I explain it is that you can have a really good shoe or a really bad car, and I think what I have is a sinking cruise ship. So if higher is not always better, then why should we grow? Well, because higher is usually better. If everyone was at these lower levels, we would not be able to have grocery stores and electricity. We have a complex world, and it requires complex thinking. And some problems cannot be solved at the level they came from. Everybody watch.
Right, so that was one of the sources of that quote, right? Problems cannot be solved at the level that they started at. And he mentions that we can't have, a complicated society if we don't have higher levels of thinking. And while I agree with that, I think it's also important to have higher levels of thinking, because that is how you attain self-realization, that's how you integrate yourself with God, and that is how you ascend spiritually. So if you want to do those things, I think it makes sense to study how to understand the higher levels of thinking. All right. Is this making sense to everyone? Let me know in the chat what you guys think about these ideas. I wanted to share these ideas because I feel like they integrate so perfectly with the other lessons that I've mentioned, with the chakra system, and basically with everything integrates into the same ideas. And it's super colorful, so that's another reason.
With people. So as I go through them one by one, try to remember where you went through them and what that felt like and where you think you are now. Okay, level 1. I call this survive because it's just basic moment to moment. What do I need? Do I need food? Do I need sleep? It's just my own feelings, and there's no such thing as someone else's mind. If we were living in this level, we would be in small survival bands, and we would not be thinking much about each other's thoughts. We would be doing what we must in order to survive. Level 2 I called connect, because now you can think about what is in someone else's mind. What does this person want or need? Primitive people at this level will sometimes do rain dances or throw virgins in a volcano. I'm not sure if that's real, but it's the kind of thing you would expect to see, because at level 2 you're realizing, okay, I have a mind and I need things, and other people have minds and they need things, so maybe it's not raining because we haven't pleased someone in the sky. Maybe the volcano is angry because it wants something, and what do I want? Virgins. So level 2 is all about what I do affects what other people think about me and what they do for me. Basically, like this. If we were living at level 2, we would be in small tribal groups, and we would be focused on safety and security and maintaining functional habits and dependable practices just day to day. Level 3 I called control. This level is still very popular in modern society. So at level 1, I have a mind with feelings and needs, and at level 2, I know that other people have minds with feelings and needs, and sometimes maybe I think a volcano does too. And at level 3, now I know that other people are aware that other people are aware that they have feelings and needs. So I know that these people have a relationship to each other the same way that I have a relationship to this and to this and to this and to this. Now I know he has a relationship to her. So instead of just direct connections, this creates social situations. Here is a woman seeing man bad on her phone, and then she sees the man in her life and goes, oh, wait a minute, if man bad, then maybe that man bad. And then at level 3, you would step back and say, well, what do I do about this situation? Why is he being bad, and what can I do about this relationship? If we were living at this level, we would be living in something like the Roman Empire, a mythic, feudal, and exploitative empire. You see this level a lot in things like the mafia and in sports teams, firemen, police, military. So even though these levels 2 and 3 involve thinking about thinking, it's mostly just for the purpose of getting what you want and having power over others. Level 4 I called belong because the primary drive is to fit in, and that drive is motivated by what they call second-person perspective. So again, at level 1, you have your own feelings, urges, and needs. At level 2, you see those of others and you can react to them, but it's still all about what those feelings mean to you. And at level 3, you understand that you're in a complex social web of relationships, and you can react to those relationships and exert control over your situation. And at level 4, that's when you realize everyone is in their own situation. That's where we get the classic folk wisdom of don't judge somebody until you've walked a mile in his shoes. You are in this situation over here, but imagine if you were him in this situation over here. Maybe you would have done what he did too. That doesn't come online until you get the second-person perspective at level 4. When level 4 was brand new, it was basically medieval empires. It says mythic empires here, nation-states. Basically large groups of people that lived by a set of rules that they shared, as opposed to the do what you want mentality of level 3. Level 4 focuses on good versus evil. The entry to that level is called the diplomat because of the way that they focus on acceptable behavior and social norms. That's their way of getting over the problems from the previous stage. You can tell when second-person perspective is coming online in children because they start looking in the mirror more. They start to realize, oh, I have other people looking at me the way that I look at other people and I have feelings about them. They're looking at me and having feelings about me, so I better be up to their expectations. Level 4 is the beginning of what we traditionally refer to as morality. Here again is the woman seeing man bad on her phone, and then she feels like, well, maybe this man is bad because my phone said so. She's projecting that onto him, having a negative experience, and then deciding what to do about it. I'm going to break up with this guy. He must be bad because I felt like it was true when I saw it on my phone. And then out here, she takes a step back and looks at herself as if she is a second person, which is why they call it second person perspective, and thinks, is that the right thing to do? This is the first point where it becomes obvious that consciousness is important, because a lot of people see things on their phones or on TV, and it gives them a feeling, and then they see that feeling coming from others, and then they do something about that relationship. So they might begin treating somebody poorly because they saw something on their phone that made them feel like, well, if that's happening here, it must be happening here too. And it's not until you slow down enough to get to level 4 that you can take a step back and ask yourself, is this a valuable process? The way that level 4 typically functions is through conformity and agreement. I believe this is the wrong way to behave. I believe this is the wrong way to behave. Agreeing on what's right and wrong and creating a set of rules and following them can solve some of these earlier problems, but also there are an infinite number of ways to decide what is right and wrong. You can have this set of rules over here or this set of rules over here, and that's where level 5 comes in. Level 5 introduces objective observation as a value. Basically, okay, you guys think A, B, C is right, and you guys think X, Y, Z is right. Well, let's figure out which one is better. And in order to do that, you have to take another step back into a third-person perspective. So again, the first 3 levels are all about me, and then level 4 is, if I was another person in my culture, how would I view my behavior? And then level 5 is another step back. If I was an alien or a stranger, how would I view my culture? This also enables you to view other cultures and sets of social norms. That's why it's global. It's the first time that you can go, oh, I get why they're like that, because they're from somewhere else. Level 5 has only really been around for a few hundred years, and it is basically where we get science and the assembly line and other forms of modern conveniences. Level 6 is where things get really fun. You might remember how it went for me. Level 5 is into objective observation, but level 6 recognizes the role of the perceiver. A different perceiver is going to equal a different perception. That brings in the fourth person perspective. So down at 1, you have me and my needs, the way I relate to others, and the way I get my way in my social situation. And then you take a step back. What does my behavior look to others around me? And what rules do we make about that? And then another step back. What would our set of rules look like to a different group of people? And then level 6, you step back again, and well, the way that you are looking is going to determine what it looks like. So when you look here, you'll see one thing, and when you look here, you'll see another thing, and when you look here, you'll see a third thing, because of who you are and where you came from. So there isn't really any way to objectively observe. Not being able to objectively observe.
Okay, that's the first 6 levels. I think he does a great job of lining it up and figuring it out in this video. I think he has a longer version video, but that's like a quick rundown of those ideas. Did that make sense to everybody? I wanted to stop there because, again, I don't want to play his whole video, and also I wanted to get back and look at this chart a little bit. I think it's important to understand these percentages here, right? So here you can see stable daily access versus the total amount of time. So the access to a level is going to be higher than the amount of time people actually spend in that level, right? So the amount of time that people spend in, say, level 1 is, in general, very, very high. And then even if only 15% of the world can get to level 6 mentally, only 3% of human time is spent there, right? So because of those facts, I wanted to focus on understanding these first 6 levels very well before we try to understand levels 7, 8, and 9. And level 9 is almost unexplainable. As Lao Tzu says, that which can be put into words is not the eternal thing. And the eternal thing cannot be put into words. But at these lower levels, you can understand again. So I feel like that was a step he mentioned that I didn't explain perfectly. Here is, we have our ideas of what is right to do, and then at level 5 it's like, okay, which of these different ideas is the best one? And then at level 6 we understand that each person has their own perspective, and so we can't have a universal set of laws that applies across the planet. It's better that each group has their own set of laws. But then at level 7, you can see harmonize. We start to take the idea that each one has their own perspective and also start to integrate with each other. So that's level 7. So I just wanted to go back through these before we try to understand those higher levels. I feel like it's useful to read these little blurbs that he has for the levels, so let's do that now. I found that these paragraphs were kind of the most interesting way to see them. So we'll start at level 1. I see, feel, smell, and hear through my senses. I feel reactions to these senses like fear, hunger, curiosity, or sexual arousal. I want to get things that I like for myself, and I want to get away from things I don't like. I get hungry, tired, cold or warm, and I feel motivated to get what I need to stop those feelings. Life is about dealing with my needs and feeling good by getting what I want. That's level 1. Level 2, I know that other people and animals also have senses and desires and feelings. I perceive feelings much like my own coming from other sources around me. Sometimes I make the mistake of experiencing a feeling in myself but perceiving that it's coming from someone or someone else, like a person or an animal or even a tree or an unseen spirit. I can now respond to the feelings I see in others and their needs. Life is about pleasing others or the gods so that they do what we want. Level 3. I live in a world full of different people, each with their own agenda. They all want what they want, and they're looking out for themselves because they have to. That's what life is. It's about getting your way. Everyone has to work with or around the needs and feelings of others, or at least what they think others are feeling, to get what they want. And I need to win that game. I can get what I want by taking or creating advantages for myself and I better do it because no one else will do it for me, right? And that is such a perfect description of the third level of spiritual awakening that we talked about earlier from Melissa's video. You know, empowering yourself, that it's about getting what you want. Now, level 4. It might be useful to have the levels numbers next to it. There we go. All right, level 4. We all have our own lives to deal with and our own problems. That can make us pretty selfish, and sometimes we don't agree on what's right. If we don't stick to the rules and do what we know is good, life is chaos, and it's every man for himself. Life is about knowing what is good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong, and doing the right thing for the common good, and making sure others do the right thing too. So that's the basic moral code level. Level 5. When you think about it, what's good and bad is different for different people, and for different groups of people too. What's good for me might not be good for you, and what works in my country might not work in yours. Before we make any big decisions, we should look at the facts so we know how to get the outcome we want. After all, everyone really wants what's best for them and their own, and not be forced into a life of service to your boss or some god. Life is about knowing how to make good things happen and keeping the benefits and always improving. Level 6 is, everyone is unique and we should all be allowed to be who we are. Society's rules often hold people back from what they really want, and we should all just do our own thing instead. How can one person ever tell someone else what to do? You're not them, so that's not fair. You can't judge someone if you didn't live their life. I don't even have rules for myself. I'm a different person over here than I am over there. Maybe if we all stopped trying to tell each other what to do, we could have world peace. I have to laugh because I know Homath doesn't like people who are stuck at level 6. And you can really tell, you can really tell when you read this paragraph that he doesn't like people stuck at level 6. And I don't blame him, you know. I also know what side of the political spectrum he falls on. So it's also useful to move up to the next level and see level 7, because I feel that that helps us to understand how to integrate 6 with 5 and 4, because they seem to clash. And he has here this white line. He has an argument that this is, let's see if I can show you without. So this is the second tier, and he calls it the second tier because this level integrates the levels below it, whereas level 6 does not integrate the levels below it. And as he describes, each level, when you're at these lower levels, each level believes it is correct. Okay, but only at level 7 do you understand that multiple perspectives are correct. All right, so let's read the level 7 paragraph. It would be nice if everyone could do what they wanted, but life isn't that simple. Who I am and what I want changes so often, I can't imagine one set of rules or one version of the truth that works for everyone. People are complex and life is constantly changing. We can't just let go and hope for the best. We need to base our choices on what we know about ourselves from our past and build a world that's ready for what we're pretty sure is going to happen. Even if that means making judgments and imposing restrictions, it might feel bad to say no to people, but sometimes it's for the best. So this is, it's a more unified and harmonic way, harmonizing, right, of approaching these problems. Instead of saying, well, we have one set of rules, let's apply it, or saying, well, we have multiple rules, let's figure out the best one, or saying, let's not have any rules at all. It's saying some rules, some places, some rules, other places. We're not going to be able to solve it perfectly. That's level 7. And I don't want to leave you guys on the total hook, so let's continue up the chart here. It's almost 4 o'clock, almost the end of the stream. I know I've packed a lot into this stream, and it's not totally organized, but hey, that's how it goes. I want to get these streams out to you guys every week, and sometimes I'm more prepared than others. I hope they're still very useful to you, and you can go and follow up with this information. I can put the links to these free. This chart is free from Homath, and you can look at it yourself. I'll put links in for the videos that I played, so you can go watch those videos as well. All right, so we'll close out by reading the rest of these paragraphs. Level 8. The world is too complex to control. Life is not a game, it's a show. You can't know for sure what will happen before you act, and you can only learn and try. You can intend to do anything you want, and you can be as careful as you want, but to some degree, you have to watch what happens and see how you feel about it later. Life is an experiment. We are all figuring out things as we go. We should all have safe places to try new things, share what we learned, and do it again if it was good. All we can do is the best that we know, so we should all know more. So this is, as I said before, going above and beyond understanding that the observer will change things, and then the observer changes through time. That's level 7. But then at level 8, understanding that the whole idea of observing and figuring out what's right is not even correct, because life transcends our ability to pin it down and figure it out perfectly. So this is what he says here. It's like you can intend to do something, but to some degree you have to do things and see what happens and experience your life. This is kind of like the paradox of time, right? So if level 7 recognizes time, level 8 recognizes the paradox of time, and that there is actually only the present moment. And so trying to pin down the present moment is an exercise in futility in some respects. I hope I still have anybody's attention, because I don't see anybody in the chat. If you're still here, hit the like and subscribe button and say hi in the chat. Let me know you're still watching. All right, we're going to read the 9th paragraph, and then if I don't hear anything from the chatters, we'll be done for today. Level 9. In an unpredictable world, everything we do is only a gesture or a wish, especially over long stretches of time. Sometimes we're good at what we do and our wishes come true, or so we think, for now. Sometimes not so much. Sometimes we don't even know. There is not always such a thing as is or is not, will or will not. There is only seems to me or not, or both, or neither. The only certain thing is the watcher in us is watching, and the wisher in us is wishing. We are not what we do or what we make. We are the watchers of the doing and the becoming. I am not the main character. I am just the spotlight. What is revealed is what I illuminate. If we want a better world and a better life, we have to learn where and how to shine the light. It's a really beautiful description, I feel like, of understanding the highest level of spiritual perspective, and maybe not even the absolute highest. I feel from studying the near-death experiences and the pre-birth experiences that there's even more levels above that. So level 9, to me, it reads as though it's someone who is starting to awaken spiritually, but has not fully understood what the nature of reality is. And once you understand the nature of reality, you realize that there are probably infinite levels above level 9 that you cannot conceive of at this point. Yale says he's still watching. That's great, buddy. I'm glad you're still here. So I feel like that's a good point to leave it for the live stream for today. There are a lot more slides that I had. I wanted to show you guys this chart. This is a really cool chart that's also free on Homat's website. I'll leave a link. This shows kind of the relationships between the levels. I found some of these really interesting. Like 2 people in level 3 are codependent. It's the marry divorce cycle, breakup, makeup. Like, people trying to get along on this level, but they're really just in it for themselves, right? But once we get to level 4, we finally have a stable, traditional marriage, bonding with opposite roles. So I thought that was interesting. We don't really have time to go through this entire chart, but I think it's useful. Here's another chart that describes the levels of thinking that you can check out. This one's from Ken Wilber. And we've got a lot of stuff that we can cover in future videos. I hope that this was helpful and useful to you. Let me know in the comments what you think. Like and subscribe. I will put the links in the description soon. And I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. And as always, I love you, and I'll see you next week, 2:30 p.m. Central Time to 4 p.m. every week. On Fridays is the time of the live stream. So join us here for more information and more understanding. Love you guys. See you next time.